beautiful people, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. This week I'm going to show you a little tutorial on how I made a DIY German feather tree inspired kind of vintage tree with a Farbois base. These were really popular in, I believe, the 19th and early 20th century. And I've always wanted to own one, but the vintage ones are incredibly expensive. So I thought that I would try my hand at creating one based on some inspiration that I found on Instagram. I follow an interior designer called Paige Contraforis, I believe her name is, and I do apologize if I have butchered that pronunciation. She has this really cool like vintage maximalist style that I love, and she has this really cool Farbois tree base that I love. Again, the legitimate vintage versions of those Farbois tree bases go on Etsy for like hundreds if not thousands of dollars, particularly the authentic ones from France in the 19th century. You can have a look. They are wildly expensive. They're typically made of cement because they typically needed to be heavy to hold up a real tree. None of my trees are real, and with that I am going to show you how I made my version. For the idea that I had, which was to make a sort of goose feather, German goose feather inspired tree, I purchased this 10mm dowel from Bunnings, and then I set about creating a little bit of a stand for it. I did this by drilling a hole into a block of wood. And as you can see, I did not have a drill bit big enough for my dowel, so I just kept drilling on and on and on until I could finally squeeze it in. I set the dowel in place with epoxy glue. If you want something to stick and never move, epoxy glue is your friend. I am a big fan of this for fixing all sorts of strange, odd objects that need a little TLC. Once I had the dowel in place, I set about leveling it, and to do this I put it against my door and used this crowbar to hold it in place. Then it was time to add the leaves. For each branch, I had purchased all of these kind of cedar pine style picks from AliExpress ages ago, and my original intention was to put them on my Christmas tree, but I saved about 50 of them for this small tabletop tree idea, and I attached them with floristry tape to these thicker pieces of floristry wire. The idea was I would then drill holes sporadically throughout the tree to create a kind of German feather tree look where the branches are sparse and far apart, giving it that really cool vintage look. I used 2 picks for each branch. With my branches set up, I used a pilot drill hole and a hot glue gun to drill holes and then secure everything in place. I drilled at a bit of an angle so the branches would poke up slightly so that then the weight could draw them down and make them a little bit more rounded. And I tried to work in a kind of cross pattern where I would place 2 on one side and then 2 on the alternating side above. When I was finished affixing all of the branches, I then twisted that same brown floristry tape all the way up the center trunk. To create the top, I drilled a hole down the center of the dowel, and this time I made a branch of 3 pieces to give it that quintessential pine tree look. I then continued wrapping that final branch in floristry wire to meld it in with the rest of the tree. This doesn't have to be perfect, and if you look at a lot of the vintage trees, you can see that they had quite a lot of character to them. There were often little lumps and bumps where the branches met the tree. Once my tree was finished, it was time to start creating the Farbois base. As I said, these used to be really popular in France in, I believe, the 19th century. They have this amazing vintage look to them, and they look very fairy tale-esque and fun. I started by cutting slits in a length of cardboard. With that finished, I traced around my base, and then I started creating a circle that would fit the base inside. After performing some kind of useless measurements, I kind of realized that the best thing that I could actually do would be to trace around my painting palette because it turned out to be the perfect size. I then cut that out with my razor blade. Again, doesn't have to be perfect because it's a tree trunk, not a perfect circle. I then started fitting the sliced cardboard around the edge. I realized that my circle could be quite a bit smaller, so I cut a couple of centimeters from the circumference. I was able to fit the wall around the circular base and hot glue everything into place. With my little tube constructed, now it's time to work on making it look more like a tree trunk. I basically took little scraps of cardboard, hot glued them on, and kind of bent them this way and that so that I could form them into curves. When I was happy with how they looked, it was time for paper mache. My paper mache method at the moment is to tear up all of our paper grocery bags, soak them in water, and use that thick brown paper as my first layer of paper mache. I usually do 2 layers of this brown paper with PVA glue, and then I move on to white paper, which typically I'll use printer paper, the kind that you print your stuff on. We still use printers, right? And then the final layer of paper mache that I like to do is either with a purchased paper clay or just by soaking toilet paper in water and PVA glue. And depending on the project, I may blend it up in a food processor or I may just leave it rough. And for this one, I left it rough because I wanted kind of an old school bark look. I layered up that paper clay, being sure to build out more of what would form the kind of buttress roots of the tree trunk. I wanted to make sure that these had some decent hollows between them so that they would look more like a really old tree. When everything was dry, it was time to paint. So I started by doing a layer of black paint followed by multiple layers of brown paint, gradually getting lighter and putting the lightest color at the highest ridge of those buttress roots. Once everything was dry, I needed a mechanism to pinch the tree into place and make sure that it stood level and didn't fall over, and I used these eyelet screws that I purchased from Bunnings to do that. The final step was to pop in a couple of cute little mushrooms, which I did by drilling a hole in the base and hot gluing them into place. Also realized that in the end of last week's video, I never showed you the writing desk, the piece of furniture that I thrifted that I was telling you about. So I'm going to show you that now. She is beauty. She is grace. She is Miss United States. She is, in fact, a very genuine antique. Very cool. You've got these little leany things. You've got a full drawer, 2 shelves in the bottom, that, and then this guy pulls out. We put the key somewhere that wasn't in the drawer, and I don't remember where we put it, but we will find it. But one hinge is busted, so we need to fix that. But you can just pull these guys out. Whoop. that. 1 and 2. And then and yeah, you can see this hinge, the screws came out. So the screws came out on this hinge here. We need to fix those, but that should be pretty easy to fix. If the wood is split, I believe, so I need to ask for some advice on how to fix that. I feel like it's going to be a like glue and matchsticks kind of job, but I might wait till the next time our carpenter's over to ask him if he has an idea of how I can fix that. Aside from that, it's in pretty good condition. I thought this was really cool. So we decided to get this for a vanity for me because my current vanity is one that I DIY'd a year or two ago, maybe 2 years ago. And it was like one of my first woodworking upcycling furniture projects, and I think I did a good job on what I wanted to do for it, but it also just like, it's not the best vanity in terms of organization and stuff. Like all of my makeup is always littered all over the floor because there just isn't enough storage. So this should have more than enough storage for makeup, hopefully hair supplies and stuff as well, like, you know, my blow dryers and whatnot, so I can put it all there, put a lamp on top. And I usually just use a hand mirror, to be honest, when I'm doing my makeup. I have like a pretty vintage hand mirror. Yeah, I do love these antique writing desks. They are beautiful. So basically just got to fix that hinge and she's good to go. It actually looked a whole lot worse for wear when we purchased it, but I gave it a wipe with a microfiber cloth and some sugar soap and then a particular like oil-based wood wash, and it's come up really nice, and I actually don't think I really need to do anything to it aside from that hinge fix. So I'm really happy with that.